We'll begin from the Mishnah again, even though you're up to the top of the page, just to get back into the Gemara. Kumlen Ablak Gemara, it's Motzei Shabbos, Parshas Vayetze. We are up to today, Daf Lamed Tes Amud Aleph. We'll begin from the Mishnah Lamed Ches Amud Beis on the bottom of the page. And basically, we're continuing this entire page is continuing to discuss when one person places a ban on another person, what they are still permitted to do. Now, this Mishnah is a bit nebulous. It doesn't really tell us who made the ban and who placed the ban, but this is the situation, and the Gemara is going to try to decipher what actually is going on here. Says the Mishnah, Daf Lamed Ches Amud Beis, the very bottom of the page. So either Hamuder Hana Mechavero or Hamoide Hana Mechavero. Two people. One person said to the other person, "I don't have any benefit from you," right? And then one of them became sick. What's not clear is who is the one that became sick. Is it the one who wants to visitor? Who is the one that it was placed on a neder? Who is the one that said, "I don't want to have any benefit from you"? Is it that the visitor, the prospective visitor who's going to Mavaka Chayla, said to this sick person, "I don't want you to have any benefit from me"? Or was it the sick person that said to the prospective visitor, "I don't want you to have any benefit from me"? We'll soon see. The nichlas levakra, if he wants to go ahead and perform the mitzvah bikur chaylim, to visit the sick, he can walk in there and stand and go ahead and do the mitzvah bikur chaylim. Aval yeshiv, he should not sit down. Why should there be a difference of whether he is sitting or whether? Sorry, just realized that. Thank you for notifying me. Why should there be a difference as to whether you are sitting or standing? That's what the Gemara will discuss. And if you're a doctor, you can cure the person personally. But you cannot cure the person's cattle or take care of his assets because there was a neder put in place that he shouldn't have any benefit from you. So the Gemara now is going to say there's two possibilities of understanding the Mishnah, and neither one actually makes sense. Because the Mishnah makes a distinction between standing, which generally means standing for a couple of minutes, or sitting, which means you spend more time there. I mean, why should that be a difference at all? Either you're permitted or you're forbidden. And the Gemara says there are two possible scenarios. Scenario number one is where the visitors said to the sick person before he was sick, "I don't want you to have any benefit from me." That means the visitor's assets, including himself, are forbidden to the sick person. The other way of learning is that the sick person said to the visitor, "I don't want you to have any benefit from me." So the sick person's assets are forbidden to the visitor. Now let's look at either scenario and see whether we can understand the Mishnah. The Maya Skidim, what's the Mishnah dealing with? If we're talking about a case where the assets of the mavaka, the visitor, is forbidden to the sick person, and the only reason why he's allowed to visit is because he's performing a mitzvah, and by a mitzvah we say mitzvah lavlahanas. It's not meant to give a hana, it's to do a mitzvah. So therefore, bikur chaylev is a mitzvah. We'll discuss later in Gemara, and that's why he's permitted to go in. The sick person benefits from the visitor, but that's only a side thing. That wasn't really the primary purpose. So why should there be a difference sitting and standing? If you walk in and stand and do a mitzvah, you can sit down and do a mitzvah. If affiliation nami, then why can't he sit? Why does the Mishnah say only standing? Unless we interpret the case in the Mishnah here, the scenario is different, and that is scenario number two. Is it that the sick person says, "I don't have any benefit from any of my possessions," which means you shouldn't walk into my house? So then, I feel like Menami. How can you walk into the house? Now, true, he's doing a mitzvah b'ikkur chaylim, but so what? If we have a mitzvah of sukkah, but if I made a neder that sukkahs are forbidden to me, I'm not allowed to walk into a sukkah. I have a mitzvah, but so what? The sukkah is forbidden. So if this sick person said that all my assets, including myself, are forbidden to you, the visitor, how can the visitor walk in the house? Does it make a difference standing or sitting? Either one's forbidden. So how do we understand Pshat in our Mishnah? So we're going to learn basically two ways, and within one of the ways is another variation of it. So Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says, I'll tell you how to understand our Mishnah. We're talking about a case here is where the visitor interdicted the poor person and said, sorry, the sick person said, you cannot have any benefit from me whatsoever. Now, so why can the Mavaka walk in? He told the Chayla, I don't want you to have any benefit from me because he's doing a mitzvah. Okay, he's doing a mitzvah. So he's doing a mitzvah, so why can't he sit as well? Because we're talking about a case where they did not pay money for somebody standing. They, no, you came in standing, you came to a mitzvah, that's it. And if you came and you sat down, they would pay you money for it. Because you spent some time, they will pay you money for it. And if you accept the money, fine, that's all right. But if you say, I forego the money, so now the visitor is giving money back to the sick person. But the sick person made a vow, I don't want to have any benefit from this visitor. Right? So so because the nichsei mevakar are forbidden to the chayla, doesn't matter which way, why. The fact is that the sick person does not have any benefit from the visitor. And if you pay money to the visitor for coming in and sitting down, and the visitor then returns the money to you, says, I don't want it, that's forbidden. That's why you can stand and not sit. Well, the Mokum Shenaitis Chala Yeshiva, they used to get paid for sitting. The Ein Noitis Chala Mida, they didn't get paid for standing. So therefore, standing, you're doing a mitzvah purely, no problem. Sitting down, you get paid. And if you took the money, again, no problem, because you're not giving anything back to the sick person. But if you say to the sick person, I forego the money, then we got a problem. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. So what you're telling me, Shmuel, is the difference is not whether you're standing or sitting. The difference is whether you get paid or you don't get paid. Basically, if you don't get paid, then you're just doing a mitzvah, no problem. You can go in there, even though the sick person has benefit, that's a side issue. But if you do get paid and you forego that payment, then you're giving the person, you're sparing him all that money. So the Mishnah should have made a distinction between whether you get paid or not whether you're standing or sitting. Says the Gemara, then my posca, then why did the Mishnah cut out this way with the sitting and standing, which are relevant? Says the Gemara, no, Hakam Aslan. The Mishnah is telling you a side issue, a very interesting thing, that actually you're not permitted to receive any payment for Bikkur Chayla if you're just standing there, because it's a bezayin, as the Rishonim say. It's an insult to a mitzvah that you're getting paid to do a mitzvah. But if you're sitting down, you're going to be there for a while. The mitzvah is a couple of minutes. You're there. You give him a bracha. You daven for him, or for the sick person, whatever. If you hang around longer to have conversations, that's no longer the mitzvah, and therefore that's no longer the mitzvah. You're allowed to get paid for that. And if you forego that payment, you're giving him benefit. So the Mishnah wants to teach you a side issue that if you're standing, you're not allowed to take money for standing. So standing is always permitted in this case. But sitting, it depends. In a place where they don't pay you money, you can sit down as well because they're doing a mitzvah. But in a place where they're not paying you money, in a place where they do pay you money and you forego that money, then you're giving benefit to the sick person, and that is forbidden. Says the Gemara, Hakamash, I want to teach you the Abba Mokum Shenait Nischar, that if in a place where they pay you, al hayeshiva, I'm sitting by the mishkan, you can take it. But al amid, if they offer to pay you while you're coming in to stand and do the bikkur chaylim, then like by the mishkan, you're not allowed to take the money. So bottom line, Shmuel says that the Mishnah is talking about a case where the visitor's assets are forbidden to the sick person, and sitting is forbidden, but only in those regions where they pay you for the sitting and you forego it. The Yibayisema agrees with Shmuel, but there's one variation. They go a step further. They say that even in those places where you don't get paid for the money, you don't get paid, you're not allowed to sit. You're not allowed to sit. Why? It's based on a case of Shimon ben Yaakov. What's the case of Shimon ben Yaakov? We learned a few days from now that when it comes up, let's say Reuben said to Shimon, I don't want you to have any benefit from me whatsoever. So Shimon cannot walk into Reuben's house, into his orchard or anything. It's Shemitah and year, and Shemitah year, everybody's fields are hefker, are ownerless, and people can walk in and take whatever fruits. So the Mishnah says, but the person who's a muder, if I ban you from having any pleasure from me, you're not allowed to walk into my house or to my farm to take the grains, even though it's Shemitah year. And the most question is, why not? It's hefker. It doesn't belong to anybody. Why can't this person walk in? So you want to give two answers. And the second answer of Shimon ben Yaakov. Now, Shimon ben Yaakov says, we are worried that you're going to overstay your welcome. In other words, you ate the grains. When we say that the field is ownerless, it's only to enable you to eat from the fruits, or from the grains. But the moment you completed, you finished eating, it's no longer hefker for you. You have to leave. We're worried that you're going to overstay your welcome. It's no longer hefker, and you are spending now time in this person's farm when this farm is forbidden to you. That's what we worry about. So he says over here. So the Gemara says, where's it here? Like Rav Shimon Yaakov, who said, you might overstay your welcome. That's what he talks about by Shemitah. We're going to use that logic, but not by standing, but by sitting. We worried if you overstay your welcome. So even in a place where they don't pay money, but the mitzvah you finish doing in a couple of minutes. If you sit there longer and longer, even though you're not getting paid, you're now giving pleasure and benefit to the sick person, where there's no longer a mitzvah. You did the mitzvah already. You're just saying no longer. So therefore, you are giving this person pleasure when there's a neder that this person should have any benefit from you. So they agree with Shmuel. The case is that the assets of the visitor is forbidden to the sick person. But where they disagree is, according to Shmuel, it's only places where you get paid and you forego the payment, it's forbidden. And they say that in all cases it's forbidden. Says the Gemara further. Comes with a third answer. Ula says, no, I disagree with both of you. Ula Amar, I believe, is talking about a case where the assets of the sick person are forbidden to the visitor, and therefore he shouldn't even be walking into the house. But we make an assumption, because he didn't clearly say otherwise, that when you're angry with that person, right? You made a neder, I don't want to have anything to do with you, you shouldn't have any benefit from my possessions. But if I would have known that that you can help me physically because I'm going to be very sick and you coming in was somehow or another very, very therapeutic, then I would never have banned that from you. So therefore, even though I made a neder, you shouldn't benefit from my assets, that neder still remains in place, but I'm not banning you from coming in and giving me some support because my life is on the line, I need some support. And therefore, what Ula is going to say, that standing, you're allowed to walk into the room because the neder does not apply to standing at Bikkur Chaylim. But I don't want you to sit. Why? Because since you have an alternative to stand, which is minimal time, then you should stand and not sit, because sit takes a lot more time, and therefore standing is enough. You don't have to be able to sit, because in light of the fact that there is a neder, you shouldn't have any benefits from my house, you shouldn't really be spending time in my house. Ula says, we're talking about a case where the assets of the sick person are forbidden for the visitor. Okay, going, for example, in a case which is the usual case, when I interdicted against it, I said that all my properties are forbidden to you to have any pleasure. I did not mean if it cost me my gesund, or were things that you can help me out. Says the Gemara, so why can't he come in and sit down as well? Says the Gemara, because he can always, because you have the possibility of standing, therefore we try to minimize the pleasure that you are getting from being in my house. We're in Lamed Tes Amud Aleph, and by 8 lines at the bottom of the page. So Mesa have a question. We're now going to quote a brisa, and the Gemara's assumption is that a brisa basically is an interpretation of the Mishnah. So the brisa probably follows the same scenario as the Mishnah, but it adds another nuance. And the brisa makes a distinction not between sitting and standing, but makes a distinction between the person that you, let's say, banned, and the son and the child. In other words, the Brisa doesn't tell us who banned whose assets have been to, but the Brisa does say that when we said in the Mishnah, you're allowed to go ahead and mevaka chayla, it's only directly to the person that you have a problem with. But the person's children, you're absolutely not permitted to walk into the house at all. You're not permitted to walk into the house at all. And for the person's children, you meet in the street, you say, hello, how's the child? Says the Gemara. And the Gemara is going to try to understand why should there be a difference between the father or the son? Why should there be a difference? Says the Gemara. Mason asks a question. It says in the Raisa, who, let's say the person became sick, nichnes levakra, you can walk in and fulfill mitzvah brika chayla. But if this person there's a problem of a neder between these two, but if his son became sick, you cannot walk into the house, meet in the street, you ask him, so how's your son doing? Now there's a big machlekes in Achronim if you can fulfill the mitzvah bikkur chaylim via telephone. Those who say you can bring a proof from right here. What's the point of Shoyel B'Shuk? Sounds like from the Gemara here that's a good thing to ask them, how's his son doing? And obviously you're doing the mitzvah b'ger chaylim, but don't go to the house, just do it in the street. In other words, if you can't make it personally, there's still an inyan to call up and see how you're doing. And another thing we learn from here is that even if you're not talking directly to the sick person, you're talking to somebody else about the sick person, just the fact that you remember the sick person is also part of the mitzvah, because as we'll see later in the Gemara, the purpose of the mitzvah is that you'll daven to Hashem. The fact that you're talking about the sick person will remind you, I better say a tefillah for that sick person. Other pasuk say you're not fulfilling the mitzvah b'ger chayil at all. And then this Bryce is not trying to tell you go ahead and bevaka chayil street. What it's really trying to do is negate the idea of going to the person's house. You want to talk to him, talk in the street, not in the house. So there's not machlekes whether to fulfill the mitzvah b'ger chayil on the phone. Someone told me that actually in the Mizrahi magazine this week, there's an article from Rabbi Rimon about this very subject. And I don't know if he in any way connects it to this Gemara here, but this is really the basis for that question. Okay, says the Gemara further. Now let's understand the distinction of the father and the son. If we follow Ula said that the assets of the sick person are forbidden to the visitor. Why is the visitor allowed to come in? The visitor is allowed to come in because what do you call it? When you made the neder, you never intended to ban this person, the visitor, from helping you out personally. But you didn't think about your son at all, so therefore the neder is still in place regarding the son. You can't walk into my house if you want to mivaka chayil my son. You can't walk into my house. So therefore it makes sense. The father you can walk in for, but you cannot walk in for the son. So according to Ula, it makes sense. Says the Gemara. If you follow Ula's way of approach, the assets of the sick person are forbidden on the visitor. I never intended to ban you from giving me life support and then shop it. That makes sense. But the son, I banned you from walking into my house, and I never thought about my son to say that it's all right to walk in if you're mavak chayil. But Shmuel said that the assets of the visitor are forbidden to the sick person, and the only reason why you're allowed to walk in because it makes a bigger chaylim that I don't understand. Why not? The whole thing is making what's it in him or a son? Why should it be a difference between him and a son? That the him you're allowed to walk in for the mitzvah, and for the son you're allowed to walk in for the mitzvah. What's the difference? And the Ran explains there's another nuance in the question, and that is if the assets of the visitor are forbidden to the sick person, but in the case where it's a son, you never made a neder regarding the son. So why can't you come in, sit down, stand? What's the difference? There's no problem between you and the son. The problem is in you and the sick person. But the sick person in this case is the son. The father's not sick. So what's the problem? Why can't you walk in and say hello or sit down? And if we're talking about that you included in your vow both the father and the son, then the din should be the same. You can walk in standing, but you can't walk in sitting. What's the difference? So Shmuel is going to answer, your premise is wrong. Your premise was that you thought the Brisa and the Mishnah are talking about the same scenario. It's not the case at all. The Mishnah is talking about exactly the way I just told you, that the assets of the visitor are forbidden for the sick person. But the Brisa is talking about, like Ula, I'll agree with you, Ula. The Brisa is talking about where the assets of the sick person are forbidden to the visitor. And that's why there's a difference between the father and the son. And that is that the father had in mind that if you're going to help me out, I'm not going to ban you. But he didn't think about the son. So as far as the son is concerned, you cannot walk into the house because the house is forbidden to you. Says the Gemara, Amalach. So he'll tell you, Masnisin, our Mishnah is talking about, I'm just talking about when the assets of the visitor is forbidden on a sick person. But Bryce is talking about, I'll agree with you. The Bryce is talking about when the sick person's assets are forbidden on the Mavakir, and that's why there's a difference between the son and the father. So anyway, my posture, why, if you're already agreeing that the Bryce is talking about a case like Ula, that the sick person is a chayla, then why by the Mishnah don't you learn the same thing? Isn't it easier to learn the Bryce and the Mishnah talking about the same scenario, and the Bryce is just adding another layer? Omar Rabba says, Rabba, no. Shmuel Masnisin Kashyase. He wasn't happy with the pshat of the Mishnah, the way Ula learned it. Bothered him was, why should there be a difference between standing and sitting? My ear Tony Oymed Avaloi Yesh. Why? And the only explanation that Shmuel can give is Shma Minod the Nichse Mevakar Asul Lachayl. It must be because the assets of the visitor is forbidden on the sick person, and therefore he's doing a mitzvah standing is all right. When sitting and he gets paid for it, then he forgoes it, it's not all right. Ula's pshat about the neder he says that I don't understand. I don't like it shot because to me, I don't see a difference in sitting and standing. If you can tell me that he never banned you from coming into Vakachela, then why should it be a different sitting and standing? Even though you Ula say because he could stand, don't bother sitting. I don't like that logic. Why not? Why? If I never banned you for coming to pay me a visit, then what's the difference sitting and standing? Talking about Bikkur Chaylim, Amar Reish Lakish Remez LeBikkur Chaylim. How do you know there's a mitzvah Bikkur Chaylim? Now, it doesn't say where does it say the Torah Remez, which means it's only Midrabanan. What's interesting is that the Rambam writes in Peri Yudal Hilchos Avelis that Achras Archim and includes Milich Mavelim and Bikkur Chaylim. He says are all Midrabanan, El the Reb, and they're all corollaries of mitzvah V'ahavta L'reacha Kamecha, which is a bit difficult to understand because V'ahavta L'reacha is Mahav Torah. So what do you mean is midavrem? So you can learn that it means is that if you, that the mitzvah to go to your friend is midrabban. But once you're there, you are fulfilling a mitzvah in the Torah of V'ahavta L'reacha Kamecha. But V'ahavta L'reacha Kamecha doesn't say that you have to go visit him. You love him, you feel good. But where once the Rabbanon said that you have a mitzvah chnas archim, you have a mitzvah nichem avelim, you have a mitzvah, which the Rabbanon are the ones who are enforcing this, of telling you that you have to go, or mandating that you have to go. Once the Rabbanon mandate you have to go back to Chayla, when you're there, you're fulfilling the mitzvah of the Torah of Ahavas Yisrael, of V'ahavta L'reacha Kamecha. And so the Gemara wants to know, is there some allusion in the Torah to Bikkur Chaylim? In other places it says that you should follow Hashem's ways, and that's why, but that's also only a remez, it's not clear, and here we bring another reason. And we say it follows. We learned from Moshe Rabbeinu the story of Korach. Moshe Rabbeinu pleaded with Hashem. He wanted to punish Korach so that no one should learn from him. Moshe Rabbeinu was very concerned that the people will be inspired by Korach, and even if Korach, doesn't end up succeeding, there'll be plenty of people walking around saying, "Oh, maybe he had a point, maybe this." Especially that you had 250 Rosh Hadrois, leaders of Shevet Reuben who joined Korach, gave him a lot of support and endorsement, and therefore Moshe was very worried. He felt that he had to do something to cut him off completely. Not leave not even a grain of truth to what Korach had to say. So this is what he pleaded with Hashem. He said, Hashem, please, I don't want Korach to die the way everybody else dies. I don't die like everybody else. I want the earth to split open and he should die there. And I don't want he should be remembered by all people. Now, what do you mean by that? So we're trying interpreting that remember all people means Bikkur Chaylim. I don't want people to mavaka Chaylim. My mashma, what exactly is he saying? Amarava. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu pleaded with Hashem. If they should, I don't want them to die like anybody else. Most people, they get sick. They're lying in bed, in the deathbed. People come along and they visit him. I don't want the same thing to happen by Korach. Because if they do, if that happened to Korach, people might conclude, Lo Hashem Shlachani. If Korach dies a natural death and people go visit Vakachela, then they will say that maybe Korach is right, that I chose Aaron to be a Kohen Gadol and all that, but my own ideas, unilateral decisions, or arbitrary decisions, and not that Hashem said it. I don't want there to be any grounds whatsoever for anybody to say that. If he dies an unnatural death, immediately, then they'll realize that that Korach had no basis. Dora Shrava talking about Korach, so we continue, we move on. We say, Dora Rava Dashan. If Hashem creates something, if Hashem created Gehenna, mutar great. You love. If Hashem did not create a Gehenna yet for Korach, Hashem, you should create it. Now, so what is going on? He's asking for Gehenna. We know Gehenna was there from the beginning of creation. It's not so. But time we learn everything created prior to creation of this world. Elohim. And these are they. Torah is number one. Tshuva, the ability to do tshuva. Gan Eden, and the one will bring a pasuk for each one. Gehenna, Kisei HaKavod, the heavenly throne. Beis HaMikdash, Ushmoi Shel Mashiach, the name of Mashiach. Whenever we talk about Mashiach, whenever we talk about Mashiach, we say the name of Mashiach, because Mashiach, every generation is a person who's suitable to be Mashiach. But like Chizkiah HaMelech was suitable to be Mashiach, but then the Gemara says the generation wasn't suitable, so it didn't happen. So you can't say that Abraham created a Mashiach, Because if the Mashiach was Chizkiah, it didn't happen. What happens then? So therefore, Shmoi, the idea of Mashiach, every generation has a person who's going to be the Mashiach. And if the generation is ready, or now we're already finding ourselves in the times of, Ikvus and Mashiach has to come. And therefore, we just call the name of Mashiach. The Torah, the Chsiv, it says, Hashem Kononi, Hashem created me, Reishataka, this first thing that he did. Tshuva, the Chsiv, it says, but Tenim Harim Yilad, before he even created the mountains, and already that he reshaped it and made it possible for people to daven. Toshev Enesh Hadaka, and then it says that Toshev Enesh, a person should do Tshuva ad Daka until he is beaten, Daka means literally to a pulp, very thin. In other words, that you enable people to do Tshuva, as it says in Tehillim. So it says in the pasuk, but before the mountain was created and he shaped it. The next pasuk says Tashev Enesh Adaka, that people should do tshuva. Next is Gan Eden Chsiv Vayit Hashem Lakim Gan Ben Eden Meken from the beginning. Meken all the beginning was already Gan Eden. Gehenim Chsiv, it says the pasuk Ki Orach Hashem prepared Me'etmo from yesterday. That means the second day of creation. Ki Orach Hashem prepared the second day of creation already. He said yesterday was already prepared. Tifta. Tifta means seduction. So we say that people who get seduced or induced to do Avedas, that's the Yetzer Hara, they go to Gehenim. And when was it prepared? From the first day of creation. So then Kisei HaKavod, the Chsiv, it says, Nochen Kisach HaMe'az, your seat was prepared back from then. Based on Mikra Chsiv, Kisei Kavod Mara Merishon. Says that Kisei HaKavod is Mara Merishon, all from the beginning of time. And Shmoy Shemoshiach, the Chsiv, it says the pasuk, Yishmoy Le'olam, that his name will be forever, Lifnei Shemesh, before the sun and all that. So he was from the beginning of time. So what's Moshe Rabbeinu saying? If there was no Gehenim created Gehenim now. Of course Gehenim was created. El Hachakam, this is what he said. If you create an opening for Gehenim, fine. If not, Yivra Hashem, let Hashem create. Said the Gemara of Aksiv, how can you create it now if it wasn't created? Ein kol chadash tachas Hashemesh. Hashem doesn't create anything new whatsoever. And all the miracles of the Rambam and Moreh Nevuchim were put into place already from the beginning of creation, or Kriyas Yamsuf and all that. So he says, El Hachakam, this is what he meant to say. There is definitely an opening to Gehenna, but where is it? That if the opening is not here near where Kairach is, then bring it over here. Masha actually asks, and I don't remember if he answers or what he answers. It's not in this Gemara here. It's in, I forget what it is really. But he asks, in Pirkei Avos it says that Hashem created Bein Hashmoshes. He created the mouth of the earth that's going to open up for Kairach. Everything that we have, Torah Shabbat, Torah Shabbat, came from Moshe Rabbeinu. How can Moshe Rabbeinu not know where the mouth is? Or if the mouth was created? What does it mean over here? What's the whole Gemara talking about? Anyway, Dada Shrava, David Dashin, it says in Pasuk, again, we're talking about Kairach, so we're continuing to digress. It says in Pasuk, Shemesh Yoreach, that the sun and the moon, Amad Zvula, stood in Zvul. So, and we say that Pasuk, so before we go further, it says, now if you remember Chagig, we learned there were 7 heavens, and your key is much lower, and Zvul is much higher. Zvul is the place where the Beis Hamikdash Shamayla is. So we touched the pasuk that the sun and the moon moved up to Zvul. Shemeleh Zvul, my boy, what are they doing in Zvul? They belong in Rakia, not in Zvul, but Rakia Kaviyah. They were fixed in Rakia. So we learn out from here, Melamed. We learn from here. We're talking about Kairach. Why are we talking about Kairach? So Rashi explains in other places, because the pasuk, a few pasuk before that, it says that the earth split open. Now, when do we know the earth split open? That's the story of Kairach. So therefore, this pasuk must also be referencing the story of Kairach. So at that time, when the earth split open, the sun and the moon went up to Shemayim. And they said to him the following. The Lamed always made a big deal as well. They went up to Zvul. If you're going to stand and defend Ben Amram Moshe Rabbeinu on a meeting, we will do our job and we will shine. We'll illuminate the worlds. But if not so, ain't onum me'idin, we will no longer illuminate the worlds. What exactly does that mean? Because they don't have bechira chavshis, they don't have a choice. As the Eibishter says, what exactly does it mean? Not sure. But at that moment, at that moment they threw towards the sun, they threw chitzim v'chanisas, arrows and spears. Amalehem, he said to them, Hashem said to them, Every day non-Jews worship you, and you have no problem, no qualms in shining, and they continue to worship you. He didn't stand up for my covenant. We'll actually have the Gemara Avodah Zarah discussion, the mission of the Gemara, why Taka, the sun and the moon, didn't stand up for the covenant. And basically Hashem says I'm not going to stop the major portions of my creation because Goyim are being silly. If they want to be silly, let them be silly, and they'll be punished accordingly. I don't have to change my creation for them. But here Hashem is saying to them that you don't stand up for my honor, but the covenant, but for Moshe Rabbeinu's honor, you will stand. Every day, every single day, Hashem has to throw arrows and spears on the sun and the moon in order for them to shine. In other words, they stop shining. So the Eibusha has to force them, the Rashi, at least more of the Pshat is it, that the Eibusha has to force them to make them shine. In other words, Hashem was upset with them. Hashem was so, the way Rashi learns, Hashem was so upset that they stood up for Moshe Rabbeinu's honor and not for his honor, that so therefore they were embarrassed to come out and shine. And every single day Hashem has to force them to come out and do their job and function as a sun and as a moon. Time we learn Bikkur Chaylim English. Bikkur Chaylim has no amount. We start off there in the morning, the Eidl Dvarim Sheilim Shir, and then Eidl Dvarim that you get the Schar and Peiris Dvarim Haza, like Kenek Yemes, and one of them is Bikkur Chaylim. What do you mean there's no shir? My English shir. There's no limit to the kind of reward you get. And all other mitzvahs, there is a limit. There's a limit to what the reward is. But now we learned to have a zari b'mitzvah kala. One should be careful with a lenient mitzvah, like a stringent mitzvah. You have no idea what the reward for mitzvahs will be. I said, I feel even though you might be an eminent person and this person is just an ordinary person or lower class person, you have a mitzvah to go ahead and don't walk around saying, oh, it's pastish. Because there is such a mitzvah called Hashavas Haveda. And by Hashavas Haveda, and one of the things of a doctor securing is the mitzvah Hashavas Haveda. One of the rules of Hashavas Haveda is we have an Eil Mitzias, or we'll have an Eil Mitzias, where it says that Pa'amim Sha'atam Mis'alamehem. You're not allowed to, cover your eyes as if you didn't notice the thing drop. And you have to return it to the owner. But if you're a person where it's unedifying for you to stoop down to pick up this cheap item, then you're permitted to continue walking. You don't have to bend down. So we would have thought that the same thing applies to Bikkur Chaylim, that you're going to visit somebody. If it's possible for me to be by this person's house, maybe I shouldn't. So we tell you no, that a godless cotton can come. There's actually machlekes and poskim for Saina, if an enemy should go, based on the next one we'll talk about in a minute. Rava says, I feel a mayor puming even 100 times a day. Every time you go in, you're still fulfilling a mitzvah. If somebody visits a sick, he takes away a 60th, either bitzara of his pain, or another version is becholya from his sickness. So they said, let's gather 60 people together. They should come in and the person will be cured. Will stand up. No, the famous example, this is the case of Rebbe, when we'll see in a minute. Well, basically the story there is that the girls, when they're anyway, the arrangements with the father and the mother, that when the girls have to get married, he will take care of them. If they become married, like Tanas and Naira, he will give them 10%. So what happens with that 10 girls? So 10 girls will get 100%. What's left for the kids, for the boys? So Rebbe says, that is, the first girl gets 10%, that leaves 90%. The second girl gets 10% of the 90, that leaves 81. The next third girl gets 10% of the 81, that leaves 72, and so on and so forth. So so there's always left over for others. Now, what happens? This is if the girls go in succession. What happens? They all go at the same time. They still follow the same procedure, but then afterwards they pool together the entire estate that they have between themselves, and then they divide each one equally. So the Gemara says one other condition, uve ben gilei. It doesn't work with everybody, it only works with ben gilei. Now what ben gilei means, generally we say, is people who are born in the same constellation, born at the same time of the year, the same time of the month, and therefore you have some kind of connection. Rashi says ben gilei means the same vintage. And maybe the reason why Rashi said the same vintage is because the Gemara is saying, get 60 people come in. If it's Ben Gila, it's not so easy to find 60 people. The Gemara makes it sound like it's so easy, just get it. But if you let Rashi, the same vintage, okay, if it's a younger person, you get young people, older people, you get old people, it's much easier to find them. But anyway, but also maybe Rashi doesn't like, because Ben Gila means that we believe there's some kind of connection. There's a connection because we're all born under the same constellations. A connection that means constellations actually have a bearing on a person's personality and their makeup. And we talked about last time. There's a big argument if such a thing is true. If actually if celestial bodies have any impact on people, the Rambam says definitely not. Rameh and others will say they do. So maybe that's why Rashi says Ben Gila doesn't mean that they're under the same constellation because it has no meaning. It means the same vintage, so they understand each other's pain and they'll daven more seriously. The Tanya, what's the story of Rabbi? Tanya said, Bas hanezainis menichse achir. If a girl is fed from the nechasim of her brothers, they tell us, Islacha, take a tenth. Amla the Rebbe, the Recha, Misha says, Bonas ben, Ein lo the ben Mokam Bonas. If you have 10 daughters, they'll take the whole 100%. What's left for the boys? They cool nothing. Amalan, the Rishonah tell these nechasim, the first person will take 10%. Shniya bamesh shayera, the second one will take 10% what's left over. And Shlishis bamesh shayera. And then if they all happen at the same time, the chayzer is b'cholkes b'shavah. Very odd, by the way, because this only happens till the girls are 12 and a half years old. Once they're over 12 and a half, they're begeris, the father's not responsible. So if you have 10 girls all ready to get married at the same time, work out the ages. Okay, the oldest one is 12 and a half of day or before then, and the next one is what? And the next one is what? So you can have a girl, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5, they're all getting married on the same day. Very odd situation. Anyway, Rab Chelba Cholosh was sick. Nothing Rab Kana went outside. Actually, he made a big announcement. And he said, Rab Chelba is sick. Obviously, he wanted to invite people to come to Bakachela. Nobody came in to visit him. So Rab Chelba said, doesn't this happen something very similar with a student, with Talmidei B'Kiva students? Shechala became very ill. Nobody came in to visit. Kiva came in to visit, because he swept and he took care of the ground, put the water on the dirt so it shouldn't flow around. There's an argument whether Kiva himself did it, or whether when Kiva was coming in, the students ran in ahead and they cleaned up the place. Bottom line is, Chaya gave such life to the sick person. The house suddenly was clean. People cared for the person. Amalei Rebbe Chisani, you gave me life. If you're not mevakachel, as if you're spilling innocent blood. So from this Gemara right here, it seems clear the reason, the purpose of bikachelim is to see what the person needs and take care of it. Sometimes there's no food in the house because the person is sick and is bedridden, can't get out. So you will see and you will take care of that person. That's what the purpose is. However, the Gemara can say there's another purpose as well. If you're mevakachel, you cause the person to live. Why? We'll see in a minute. If you're not mevakachel, maybe you cause the person to pass away. My grandma, because I wasn't mevakachel, I caused the person to die. What do you mean? The idea is when I'm mevakachel, I'm davening to Hashem. So now we have a new reason for mevakachel. That is, when you're mevakachel, you're supposed to daven to Hashem. And interesting, the Ramon Shulchan says, if someone's mevakachel and does not daven, did not fulfill the mitzvah bikachel. But what do you mean? What about the first part? It says here that you're also supposed to sweep up and help out. So why, if you did that and you didn't daven, didn't you do bikachel? So maybe it seems to me, I told you that there's two parts to bikachel. One is Avos Yisrael and one is the mitzvah bikachel. Maybe that's a difference between the first part and the second part. Going to the house and helping out, bringing them food and sweeping the floor, that's Avos Yisrael. That's Avos Yisrael, because Bikkur Chaylim was a trigger that enabled you, that caused you to go to the person's house. But what you're doing is Avos Yisrael. Davening for that person, that's a specific thing. That is the mitzvah Bikkur Chaylim. And the Ramah says, if you don't daven for that person, say a chapter Tehillim or have in mind during davening, if you don't have, if you don't do that, then you're missing out on the mitzvah Bikkur Chaylim. And maybe that's the two parts of Bikkur Chaylim. And then he says, if you don't visit the sick, it's as if you're davening that he should die. So you should die. If you're not mevakachel, then you're not davening for the person to live or die. That's it. Not that you're davening for the person to die. You missed the opportunity to daven to help the person out. The Ran actually has another pshat. Sometimes there's a mitzvah to daven for a person to pass away. Remember, he had the Enik Subas. Rabbi Yudan Nossi was very sick. First, the rabbis pleaded that he should stay alive. But then when the maid of Rabbi Yudan Nossi saw the terrible pain that he was in every time he went to the bathroom to remove his film, so she davened that he should pass away. So sometimes there's an inyan to daven the person to pass away. And very interesting, in Gemara Basra it says, but Shulchan brings it out, halacha l'maaseh. The very last line of Hilchot Bikkur Chaylim, of that first chapter, 335, the Ramah says that somebody is sick, you should go to the tzaddik of the city and ask the tzaddik to give you a bracha. And this is where you see, people going to the Lubavitcher Rebbe or other Rebbes to get a bracha for sick. It's a Din Shulchan Aruch and the Gemara. So we start out Hilchot Bikkur Chaylim. That's our job to daven for them. But the Chayla also has an inyan to go to the tzaddik to get a bracha, and so on. Let's just do two more lines because that's where we finish today. Rava says the following: Yom Kadma, the first day a person is seriously ill, the cholish feels weak. Amaline, he told his family, don't tell anybody. To listen mazli. I don't want my mazel. I'm very vulnerable right now, and if people don't want me to live, I have enemies, plenty of enemies, I'm going to be in trouble. After Abaye told Rava that a rabbi that everybody likes is not doing his job, because obviously he's not admonishing them or rebuking them, he started doing that, and he made himself a lot of enemies. I don't want them to daven that I should die. And because I'm vulnerable, who knows which way it's going to turn out. When they onwards, he said, Puku v'achriz, we should go out in the market, hold the sanily, because anybody who hates me, he'll be happy. In fact, it's good that my enemies will be happy that I'm dying. Why? Because the pasuk says, "Bin foil ayivcha al tisbach." Your enemy falls, don't rejoice. And then it says, because Hashem will see that what you're doing is wrong, and He will take the anger away from that victim. So I want them to be happy. Hashem then will take away the decree against me, so I will be healthy. So it's clear in the Gemara here. The first day, no one should come, but the second day onwards, they should. And that's why it's amazing what Shulchan Aruch rules, and everybody wants to know, it comes from the Rambam, but Shulchan Aruch as well, that the first day only family and very close friends should come. The second day nobody should come. The third day and onwards, afterwards they should come. And they all ask where the Rambam gets it. Unless, because he says to the family, don't tell anybody, that means the family themselves, they do know. They just don't tell anybody outside in the street. So that's how we know the first day. But how does the Rambam know to jump to the third day? And says you don't tell people a person's sick till the third day. The Gemara seems to be saying right away, Bikan. Right after that, you go out there. Unless the Rambam had a different version in our Gemara. Okay, everybody have a good week. And we'll see you at the show. We'll talk.